I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the Thursday, July 18th, 2024, committee of the whole meeting.
Trustee Hallwax. Here. Trustee Lister.
Here.
Trustee Mealopoulos. Trustee Underdog. Here. Trustee Rubin.
Here.
Trustee Scott.
Here.
President Rowe.
Here. We are not live streaming the meeting tonight. The video recording will be available on the village's YouTube channel. Pursuant to the village board's recently adopted updated public comment rules, because the village board's regular meeting is scheduled the same night as the committee of the whole, public comment will only occur during the village board meeting, which will be done tonight upstairs in our council chambers. If you have a comment on an agenda item that's included on tonight's committee of the whole agenda, I'll ask the comments be provided when we reach that item on the agenda. At the appropriate time, all comments related to agenda items are limited to 3 minutes, which will be strictly enforced in compliance with the pre-established rules approved by the board. I'll limit total public comments on non-agenda items. We're not doing non-agenda items, so that won't matter.
On agenda items.
On agenda items, to not more than 30 minutes, and speakers should state their name for the record. All right, the first item on our agenda is discussion and staff report and the expansion of village prosecutor duties. I'll ask our public safety director, Sean Lochran, to present. Public safety.
Thanks, sir. Just wanted to provide, good evening, everyone. Just wanted to provide you with a brief summary and an opportunity for questions for our ongoing discussion of enhancing prosecutorial services by Mr. Addis and the Addis Law Group. By way of background, Mr. Addis has been serving in this capacity in his former and now current company since 2015. He is also the village prosecutor for as well as Glencoe, Northbrook, Morton Grove, Kenilworth, Wilmot, and Park Ridge, with his current partner, Larry Berg. In the pursuit of that, he serves by prosecuting traffic offenses, city ordinances, and animal related complaints, as well as provides business license services as well when needed. So as part of this multi-phase interdepartmental goal of looking into expanding and enhancing the prosecution, as well as looking into administrative hearings, which are enjoyed by other municipalities that surround us, this is part of that study. The first thing that we wanted to do is make sure we had the legal authority to do so, into expanding his duties to include misdemeanor traffic offenses such as DUIs, reckless driving, offenses such as that. Elrod Freeman conducted that research and then verified indeed we do have, despite not being a home rule, entity, we do have that authority. So the next steps beyond that was ensuring what the process would be. The process is as follows. Well, first, let me discuss why. Mr. Addis is performing well beyond what we normally enjoy from the Cook County prosecution for a myriad of reasons. I would say we're not necessarily as satisfied as we could be with the prosecution at that level. Not contained within the memo explaining the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, those state attorneys that are working in the traffic court, that is typically an entry-level position. In that capacity, some mistakes can be made, experience might be lacking. And as a former prosecutor himself and having well over 25 years of experience, as well as it being his business, as well as having ties to the community, Mr. Addis is absolutely invested in his role. And in such, he takes additional steps to ensure accountability, additional steps to ensure that the job is being well done, and we're satisfied with that product. So then we determined as far as what the pathway would be. Looking at, in order to ensure that he can fulfill this mission, we would have to look at the internal infrastructure to include that we make sure we can route these tickets properly to the proper courtroom, make sure that we can indeed charge Illinois Vehicle Code as a municipal ordinance, which would require a drafting of an ordinance for you to approve, or we could adopt those laws and cite those appropriately. We would also have to ensure that we have the software and hardware capability of this pathway to make sure, again, support the overall mission. And lastly, we would have to negotiate a price. Now, of note, Mr. Addis has been performing these services in the last 9 years without a rate increase and at an hourly rate. There was an initial proposed amount that was contained within the memorandum. I do not feel presently that that's going to be our endpoint. However, that rate, in doing a comparative study with several different municipalities nearby, that is something that is similar to as far as rate goes. However, of note, Glencoe Public Safety does not generate the volume of citations as comparatively. So that's where I feel like that's the opening salvo. We'll work our way through that. So 9 years, just for comparison, you see an average inflation rate of 3.18% per year, or a cumulative price rate of 32% increase if you compare the last 9 years compared to now. And as mentioned, there has not been a rate increase in those 9 years. Let's see. And this is, as mentioned, this is the first step. The next step would be looking into using Mr. Addis for the administrative notice or the citation process, which is again highly enjoyed by, in particular, Northbrook, which he performs the same services. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, lastly, it is not anticipated this is going to be impacting the 2024 calendar year budget. I think by the time we iron this out, it better come live in 2025.
So how bad a problem do we think we have that people are, violating, these traffic laws and getting away with it?
So
Is it a problem, or is it dangerous? Are we addressing a danger here?
So I would say that we have the citations. I can speak specifically to that. We had a most recent case where an offender, a traffic offender, fled from police in a neighboring township. We ultimately apprehended that offender, and we had cited him for some offenses relative to the crime. A firearm was recovered, and he was placed in custody. The traffic offense, which he should have been held accountable for, I will say it was not pursued with as much zeal on that level. Again, for those reasons cited. Mr. Addis ensured that hearing this, he ensured that there were steps that were taken to make sure that accountability was there, and to the steps of where he personally wanted to make sure that convictions were accurately reduced to the records on the driver's abstract. Those are important because, again, as mentioned, public safety, we do have a lot of interaction when it comes to traffic enforcement. The ultimate goal was not to issue the citation. The ultimate goal was to ensure compliance and make sure that the safety's well-being is maintained through enforcement of traffic. But those we do right, there is an expectation that there's going to be some good follow-through on the part of the public. So that said, I think this is the best way to ensure that. And this is something, quite frankly, that just about every municipality has done. We're one of the few that don't. So I think this is a natural progression.
Yeah, just to make sure, and there may be a much higher level of understanding here in the room than I may be speaking to. This is a relatively minor change. This isn't talking about setting up local adjudication where you have tribunals up in this is the same courtroom where these cases are being brought. And instead of relying on the Cook County State's Attorney, which is being very kind, is understaffed, has priorities have been reorganized a number of times over the past few years, and is not focusing on these types of cases. From a cost perspective, once again, to reiterate what Tommy just said, the village is not seeking to have a financial windfall here, but along with the added costs are that if it is a locally pursued case based on a local ordinance, the fines also go back to the village. So there would be some at least cost recapture, and that would mitigate any increase in the amount of hours that Wayne would be actually.
Yeah, I'm not anticipating it would be a substantial increase in the amount of hours involved for Mr. Addis. I just think this would be a more efficient way of going about it.
Do we know if other communities also follow this flat rate model? Question one, and question two is, why would we change rather than maybe just increase hourly rate by the 30%? I have a hard time just offering somebody a flat rate services whether we pay per month.
Yes, I agree. I agree 100%. That was the initial representation when we began the discussions. Mr. Addis was a flat rate. The two neighboring municipalities where he also performed a similar service, both have a flat rate. That the amount that he had represented to us initially is very similar to, akin to those. But my feeling is, I don't think that that's going to be the endpoint. I agree. I think an hourly rate is probably the best way to go, but without getting into too much detail, which would involve essentially a negotiation with Mr. Addis. We're not there yet. I was still looking at it. Just wanted to update you as far as what the beginning was and where we were. But that is one of the things in looking at the cost versus what the amount of work involved and how much more work it would involve. Considering all that, we want to make sure we're very careful with the money spent.
And just to speak to why, because I work with communities that have had these type of discussions with their prosecutors. If you have a record of basically over time, what these cases are over a year, there are going to be times when you're going to have more prosecutions around the holidays, 4th of July, New Year's. There's going to be a lot more of those types of cases that are brought. But it does allow for a smoothing and it allows for predictable expense from month to month. But the same challenges of predicting, is that corresponding to the actual time spent in court? Sometimes you'll be a little bit over, sometimes with any retainer, you want to be where you're maybe a little bit over, sometimes a little bit below, but in the end, you're hitting it. So that's a determination that staff will have to make.
That's one of the analyses that we're going to undertake over the next few months before we come back to you with any changes to the contract, is to get a better sense of, from a volumetric standpoint, what are the number of DUIs in the last 5 years? Give us a sense, and then try to apply that up against these rate structures.
On that line, the 50 traffic violations and 10 non-moving vehicular violations are averaged, smoothed out with the 4th of July, Christmas, and holidays, etc. So 50 traffic violations, he's going into court and doing 10 at a clip, right? And knocking 10 out. It's not 50 separate meetings. So I guess we're trying to judge what the hourly is now. And we can show what we paid in the last several years, right? So we can go and we've got hard data to help make this call, right?
Yes. So the way Mr. Addis and his partner prosecute these cases is each officer is assigned a court key, and it's a regular court key per month. He'll arrive and then prosecute those individual cases if there's a demand for trial, represent the village. Where the increase in time for Mr. Addis is going to be primarily with DUI cases. DUI cases are a lot more involved. One would be familiar with a traditional trial. That's going to be an increase in the amount of time. And that's where I feel, again, those are not being pursued with the level of attention that I think they should be. And I think we should align ourselves to the same practices that are the surrounding areas. It just comes down to, the initially proposed amount is a substantial increase. I don't think we're going to be going anywhere close to that.
Okay, look, oh, go ahead.
So this is what we'll call an incremental increase in service, but also overall increased cost. Is that right?
There would
I don't know
be-
how, what I'm trying to get at is our ability to recoup as much of that additional cost as possible.
Yes, and it's a secondary or even tertiary byproduct of the if we do continue, or we do actually pursue this with your permission, ultimately there is a potential for recouping some of that with those fees and fines in the end. That's not the ultimate goal no, but that is a byproduct.
You'd like to do that.
Yes.
You know, having served as a municipal adjudicator for this community in the past, I was severely limited as to what I could charge. And it didn't matter how complex the case was or what guy came back a couple times, and then he came back a couple times. I felt that some people were kind of gaming the system, not my world, and those days was parking.
And trustee Underdog, I think that's a good distinction, right? You're talking about kind of local ordinance violations. We're still looking and planning to come back to you all with some recommendations on how to look at an administrative adjudication program again.
Oh,
It's in our work plan this year. State legislation changed last year to accommodate for non-home rule communities. One of the reasons you were so limited back then was we really could only do it for a very limited number of issues. And within that, within a very limited amount of fine or fees associated, we have more flexibility. We're still looking at that and how that would be structured. This is to some degree kind of a related but separate issue because it really is focused on court action. We're just prosecuting it rather than waiting for the state's attorney's office to do so. And so it's related to administrative adjudication. That is something we definitely find some value in exploring further. We've been having some conversations with neighboring communities about software, about how we might share an adjudicator, share an adjudication courtroom, usually council chambers, as you will recall, those types of things. And we'll be coming back to you guys later this year with some thoughts on that. But we thought, given the number of steps that go into this and the work that's already been undertaken, it'd be a good opportunity to just brief you all on this component of that conversation.
And just to clarify, for even for a local ordinance, it is limited for each charge, in each instance, to be $750. However, a conviction can still result in suspension of a license.
Mhm.
And so, that end consequence,
it's a big deal.
it's a big deal. And just because it's prosecuted by our prosecutor, if it's in traffic court, the result to the deterrent effect of that sanction is still present.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right, well, I think you probably have guidance, and I and so we're clear. We obviously care about the safety of our roads. Drunk driving is not a joke, and so we want that pursued. We're not interested in doing this as a profit center. There was that town in Missouri that got famous for, we're not doing that. That's not what we're interested in, which is not to say if somebody's fine, we wouldn't take our share, but we're not looking for that. We're just looking for safety. And if we're behind our neighbors, we shouldn't be. Okay. All right. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a discussion and staff report on the Lake Michigan and North Branch of the Chicago River watershed plans, and I'll ask our village engineer to present.
Thank you. Good evening. As background for the discussion and as described in the packet, rainwater that falls within the village either ultimately drains to Lake Michigan or to the North Branch of the Chicago River. Since the village does drain to those two bodies of water, we are part of both the Lake Michigan watershed and the North Branch of the Chicago River watershed. Lake County, their Stormwater Management Commission, Lake County LCFMC, they oversee stormwater regulations and permitting throughout Lake County. And they've developed watershed-based plans throughout Lake County, including for these plans for Lake Michigan watershed and the North Branch Chicago River watershed. They included stakeholders in northern Cook County because drainage and water goes over those county limits. So as shown on the exhibit, you can see the number of northern Cook County communities involved in each of those watershed-based plans. Village was involved in the development of these plans for both the Lake Michigan watershed and North Branch. These have been years in the making, and Lake County had requested stakeholders
stakeholder communities adopt these watershed plans or at least show support for those watershed plans. And Lake County has adopted both plans as of last year, 2023. So the plans focus on, goals to enhance water quality, reduce flood damages, and protect natural resources, all lining up with village priorities. Actions and recommendations in the plans are all voluntary. They kind of give you a roadmap on how to improve and focus on those goals. And the big thing is the support of these plans, adopting them into village would support our applications for future grant resources that focus on enhancing water quality, reducing flood damages, or protecting natural resources. There are funding sources through the IEPA out there for those type of things. So we wanted to bring this up for discussion and review before we move ahead with bringing a resolution. With that, anybody have any questions?
So I have one. What does Cook County have to say about this?
MWRD has their own process and watershed work groups, but they do not have a base plan that's accepted. But they are in support as village is part of the North Branch Watershed Work Group, and similarly in Cook County, we're part of the watershed planning, North Branch Watershed Planning Group, but MWRD will receive stormwater management also participates in both.
So we're not gonna get cross, I just, we just don't want to be caught in crosshairs here.
Correct. Won't be in conflict with any other.
Well, sounds sensible to me. Anybody have questions?
I have a quick question. Have we identified maybe any potential projects we want to incorporate in the future, say, what types of grants?
So IUPA administers the bulk of the grants that this would relate to. Some of the enhancements would be focused on ravine outfalls, those types of areas, stabilization of ravines. Those do get tricky because they are majority private property there. But the village can act as the representative there and apply for those grants. So that's what we're looking at.
Great, thank you.
And we do have some work to do on our ravine outfalls. It's been an effort that we've been paying more attention to over the last several years. I think, am I remembering correctly, the outfall over by North Shore Congregation Israel, that we received a grant for that particular project. But these are, as you know, large projects, expensive projects. The ability and the opportunity to achieve grant funds would be very helpful, particularly because of the complexities and the scale of the project. So a good area for us to be focused on. And James has been sitting on these committees now for as long as you've been with us. But and I'm trying to remember our participation prior to your.
The North Branch Watershed Work Group started, I think it was around 2018, so shortly before I arrived. So I've been participating in those meetings with Trustee Underdog too.
That's right.
And then
Previous job.
That's right.
Lake Michigan doesn't have a formal work group in place, but that would be one of the next steps with these plans too, is to form Lake Michigan.
Any other questions?
I might mention that one of the goals for the sustainability task force relates to ravine and ravine management, and this would contribute directly to that issue.
Important point. Yeah, important point.
Okay. Thank you for the report and for the work. Anybody have any other business for our committee of the whole? If not, almost a record. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
For a second.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. We're adjourned.